So today's guest is Janet Cowell. If you live in North Carolina, you have heard of her. She is the CEO of the Dix Park Conservancy. She served 15 years in elected public office, including on the Raleigh City Council, in the state Senate, and as the North Carolina State Treasurer. She's currently running in the 2024 race to be Raleigh's next mayor. She's originally from Memphis, Tennessee. She earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania and also her MBA and a master's degree from UPenn's Wharton School and the Lauder Institute of Management and International Studies. She serves as the independent chair of the IFM Global Infrastructure Fund Investor Advisor Committee. She's a board member for the New Republic Bank, and she chairs the Wharton Business School Executive Education Board. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
Janet, welcome to the program. So I know you're really busy. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And I think when I was looking at your bio and kind of researching you online, the thing that really stood out to me, and I know a little bit about Wharton because my daughter's there, is that you came here in 1997 and you were working for Lehman Brothers. You did some consulting, but you really pivoted your life and your career into public service. What was it about public service that just attracted you and drew you?
So I grew up more in a public service realm and had no exposure to business at all. So really, Wharton was the maybe anomaly in there. So my dad was a Methodist minister, mom was a public school teacher, and we talked about public issues around the dinner table. I was lucky enough to go to Penn and got exposed to this whole business world, and I also loved international travel. I had been an exchange student. So for me, the combination of business and I should say, I mean, I was there when the wall came down, and I had all these friends from Wharton undergrad who were going and rebuilding the Eastern European economy, and you just realize there's a lot of power in business and capital and finance, and I wanted to understand that, but I think my heart was always more in the public service realm.
And I think probably understanding that helps you work in the public service arena because you have a very strong grasp of financial issues, including budgets, which is a huge part of what anyone in elected office deals with is budgets, right?
Right, and you need to know how to get things done, and people in business are generally pretty good at that, and if you can marry that with a mission, you
It's
got a
even
good
better,
combo.
right? So let's back up a little. You're from Memphis, Tennessee. Your dad was a minister. How in the world did you get to UPenn from Tennessee? I mean, that's a big stretch probably, and this was in the 80s, I'm assuming. How did you make that leap? And what was it about Penn and going to the Northeast that drew your attention?
So I would just say my dad in particular was more risk friendly, so he would start new churches. We moved around a lot, and we were all very bookwormy, and so they just encouraged us, if you can get into a college, we will pay. And so all of my siblings, we all ended up going to school in the Northeast, and I wanted to go to a big city. I grew up, I would read Vogue magazine.
So you were
See all those pictures of
imagining.
New York, and I just wanted all that energy, and so ended up at Penn and had a very good experience, and I loved how international Penn was. Went to high school in Nashville, Tennessee, and yeah, I was like a kid in a candy shop.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine back then Nashville obviously has changed so much and has gotten a lot more international.
I had never had a bagel.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a really
Right?
great little vignette because one of my very best friends, Sean Rangel, freshman year at Duke, we said we're going to go get bagels, and he said, "What is a bagel?" So that was always kind of our joke, and he definitely didn't know what lox were. That
No
was all
idea.
new. That was all new. So, you've held several elected positions. You were elected to Raleigh City Council in 2001. And tell me if these dates are wrong. You became a state lawmaker in 2004. You were state treasurer, I guess, from 2009 to 2017. Now you're running for mayor. Politics is not an easy game. I mean, it is not. You really have to choose it, right? Because there's so many obstacles. Are there obstacles that are specific to being a woman in politics, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to navigate being competent and also being likable. I think it's easier for men to strike that combination. But for women, it's either you're competent or you're nice.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really great point. And I've never heard anybody say it that way, but I think that makes a lot of sense because I think as women, we want to be liked, right? And we also have this side of us that's nurturing and that may be sensitive and compassionate in a way that men are not socialized to be. Not all men, obviously. And so I think that's a really good point that it's hard to be both of those things. And
Yep, so there's striking that balance. I think you also need more validators. Doesn't matter what school you went to, what degree you have. Generally, you're going to need somebody of credibility to back you up.
to support you. I also heard somebody the other day, a woman that I interviewed for the show who was in business, say one of the biggest issues is that women want to know what they're doing. They don't want to pretend. They don't want to bullshit. They want to say, I know what I'm doing. And so they won't fake it till you make it. They're much more about, I've got to do the research. I've got to do the work. And then when you're competing with people that maybe aren't feeling that same way, I think that's hard, you know? So I know another one of your passions is green space. Talk about what you're doing with the Dix Park Conservancy, and you know, obviously, some of my listeners are not from Raleigh, so explain what that is and what you're doing.
Right, so Dix Park is a 300 plus acre old mental health hospital, old plantation that is right near downtown Raleigh, and just a stunning piece of property physically. It has a hillside overlooking downtown, groves of large oak trees, a creek, meadows. So it's a pretty fantastic place, and it was really has deteriorated. The hospital closed in 2012, like many mental health hospitals across the country. Citizen groups got together and convinced the city to buy it from the state. So it is now a public-private partnership with a conservancy, you know, similar to Central Park Conservancy, and the city owning it as a park, and we are developing it into a park, meaning this used to be like a little city. We had 800 buildings. Gradually, you're trying to restore some,
And take some down.
demolish some,
Right.
expand the green space, add amenities like bathrooms, trails, food and beverage, playgrounds.
And there's a lot of events there. I live obviously right near it, as you do too. There's a ton of festivals, and I think that brings a lot of people to the park and saying, wow, this is a really great space to have in a city.
Yeah, Dreamville is the biggest. That's the J. Cole founded hip hop festival that has really big names. People from all over the globe coming, 50,000 people a day for a weekend, and it's kind of like a rap version of Woodstock in that you're out in this massive field among the trees.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and I've enjoyed everything from biking there to walking to running. The dog park is fantastic. So I think people who live in this area really appreciate it. And I think, you know, like you said, it reminds you of like a Central Park. I mean, it has that vibe to it. So you've won a lot of awards. I mean, a lot of them business related, but you've also won the Order of the Longleaf Pine in 2017 from the governor for outstanding service to the state. And you were just recently named one of Women Shaping Raleigh from Raleigh Magazine in 2023. You know, it seems like for you, the thing that really lights a fire under you is doing things for the community. What is there a number one thing? What are some of the things? Obviously, the Dix Park, but what are some of the things that are really important to you?
Well, you're right. I love tangible projects. I am not someone to go, you know, philosophize or. So the park actually creating spaces that empower people, that are welcoming, that are hopeful or recuperative, and particularly for me with Dix, because it was a mental health hospital that was surrounded by central prison and orphanage, all of these places that house people that were viewed as less than or needed to be separated from society, and that you could take that same space and make it a hopeful, empowering space is, to me, incredibly just the power of that. story is compelling.
Honoring the legacy, I guess, of those vulnerable people.
Yeah, I mean, and we did get a National Endowment for the Humanities to have those stories told, and I think that's very unusual for just a typical public park. There are parks all over on old plantations, et cetera, but to find the history of the people who worked there, who were patients in a hospital, and try to lift up their stories, because many of those people were not treated well, right,
Absolutely.
during their lifespan. So that is special, but I think beyond a park, bringing that to the city of Raleigh. I love cities. I've had the good fortune to live in many cities and see things around the globe, and when you go somewhere and you feel inspired and energized, and it's just, I mean, even the subways of New York, and you're there sometimes at 11 p.m. and everybody's playing music and it's lively
Energy. Yeah. There's something about it. And I will say, having lived in the suburbs of Raleigh and now living in downtown Raleigh, I mean, I am all in. We just love being here. We love the energy. We love our neighbors. We love being able to walk out the door and just go have a meal, or, walk the dog, wander around and see so many people. And it really is, I mean, it's really a city that's growing and experiencing some great, great things happening in downtown. This just occurred to me as a former journalist, a recovering journalist. I think one of the biggest issues between journalists and people in public office is transparency, right? I think so often it's you go to a press conference, or somebody puts out a press release, or you talk to somebody and they're trying to prevent liability. They're trying to protect themselves. They're trying to protect whatever entity that they work for, whether it's a city, a state, a county, whatever. And, I feel like we just need more transparency from our public officials. And I think a lot of that is fear. I think it's driven by fear. I think you have attorneys that say, oh, you can't say that. You can't do that. You have to, be careful. But what do you think on that issue in terms of public officials and just being more transparent with the public? Like, you know what? We made a mistake, or I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. Let's fix it. And this is how we're going to do it. I mean, that kind of goes back to the tangible stuff that you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all hate that cardboard sort of nobody, they're saying a lot but not saying anything. I will say, when I was treasurer, we published a lot of transparency on our portfolio. I think it can have pros and cons, right? We had certain folks that were just opposed to
sharing
some broad issues, and they would cherry pick numbers, make up their own narratives about those things. It was sort of my early taste of, magical realism in politics.
Sure,
like
that
there's
makes
these
sense.
narratives being woven that you're just like, are you kidding me? Are you on LSD? How could you be coming up with this stuff? But people believed it. And so you realize you put numbers out there, a lot of the public may not have the context for what that means, and you get actors who want to use that information in a negative way. So it can be a mixed bag. It is very challenging to have a communication and with the public. And of course, I'm now, of course, running for mayor, and I'm watching the city hall hearings, which has become very personal, like people calling them out on their identity. You're black, and so you should be voting this way, or you should feel about this issue, or you're gay. And it's all these kind of sensitive personal items that people are...
that really don't have anything to do with public service in any way. And really probably shouldn't.
So it's painful. And like you said, there is a vulnerability about sitting up there and having people call you out and say what your identity is and critique you individually. So, I mean, it is challenging to have these conversations. I think it is the whole community has to work on how we're talking together.
Better diplomacy.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with you. And as a journalist, I would say the last 5 years of my career was just, talk about painful. The online harassment and the, everything from obscenity to personal attacks to threatening people that you interviewed. It was pretty unbelievable, to the point where there's actually a study being done right now on how the attacks on journalists are affecting them getting out of the business, which is they're getting out of the business at alarming rates because people say, I don't want to deal with that. It's just really defeating. But I think there's a balance, right? There's a balance between, allowing somebody to know everything about you to the point where they try to use things against you or whatever, and then just saying it like it is. Here it is. This is what it is. I don't know how you do it. You do so many different things, and obviously you're very talented in so many different areas. A lot of women, however, over a certain age, don't feel that. They may be downsized from their company. They may be trying to get back into the workforce after having children and being an empty nester. And a lot of women feel like there's not a place for them, that they feel irrelevant. They don't feel seen. They're not being taken seriously. And they just really are like, I know I have another chapter, but I just don't know how to get there. What advice would you give to women who are in that situation?
Well, I completely understand what you're talking about. Even when I spent just half time in New York and I saw so many women who had been in Wall Street and finance and taken time off to have a family and wanted to get back in, and it was almost impossible.
Brutal, yeah.
And you see how smart these women are and how much talent and how underutilized that talent.
Sure.
So, I do think finding local, things that you're really passionate about and diving into that, be it, a big park conservancy or legislative issues. My sister-in-law does a lot of lobbying in Colorado just around like youth, juvenile justice, et cetera. She has been incredibly successful in getting bills passed in the Colorado legislature as a citizen lobbyist. Again, one of these really talented women who's just diving in and finding a group of like-minded people.
Finding some purpose, yeah. And I think that's one of the things where companies and organizations are really shortchanging themselves, because we're talking about people that have experience, life experience, wisdom. I just interviewed a friend of mine who went back to law school. She's just turned 50. And she saw how many problems there were in the family court system and said, I want to help change that. And so she was driven by that. So now she's a junior associate at a law firm, starting her career all over again. But I do think there's so many women that have so much to offer.
Well, and I would also say public service. I think there's a lot of jobs in public service because they don't pay as much, but can be incredibly meaningful. You kind of get to wear the white hat on many occasions. And if you can, bring your talents to those positions. I know city of Raleigh, state, et cetera. If you can find the right pocket of leadership, and there's some tremendous work being done, as you said, that is just transformational within government.
Absolutely. So I know you're very busy and you probably don't have a lot of free time, but what is it that you like to do when you are not doing all of the other stuff you're doing?
Well, it may not be totally fun, but the whole strength training thing is one of my mantras, because you talk about getting to be 50 plus.
Yeah.
And really wanting to be strong and stay healthy, vibrant. And I think one thing that so many women get preached is be thin, be thin, be thin, but not be
strong.
Healthy and strong. And so thinking about that, and then how do you incorporate more fun aspects into your workout as well. But and I love reading, so for me that is an escape. I love audiobooks because you can
do other things,
walk or drive or whatever, just zooming around town, and you're have your mystery novel on or your podcast on. And then I recently renovated a house, and I love visual arts. That's something I've loved about the park too, getting to work with artists and landscape architects. So I had a glorious time thinking about the paint and the design and the historic preservation and the technical, like the can-do practical skill sets.
Right. How does that work? Yeah. I'm a big exerciser, so I really believe in exercise, and I've always been a runner. And in recent years, I'm now into yoga, which has really changed my fitness, and then hiking, just anywhere. I'll go anywhere to hike. So what's on your bucket list? Anything you haven't done that you would still like to do?
Well, I am actually, I just booked a trip to Singapore. I'm going to go visit some friends there, but I have not been back to Asia in 30 I haven't been to Singapore in 30 years.
Is that where you did your study abroad in college?
So I was in China in college, and then I worked in Jakarta, and I was a stock analyst in Southeast Asia back in the day. So I have a friend still that I got to know in Jakarta who's in Malaysia. So I'm really looking forward. Singapore is known as a very green city, a very advanced. The management, they have one of the most sophisticated sort of city halls or civic, service sectors on the globe. Incredible investors. So just going back and hanging out and seeing what is in Singapore, all these years later. So that's one thing I decided you need time to get there. It's
Sure.
24-hour
Oh,
flight.
yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great trip, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, the furthest I've ever been is Uganda.
Okay.
And that was with a medical mission trip. We were doing a documentary with Duke, and that was a long. I think it was like 32 hours.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Best of luck.
Thank you.
This fall, and I know you're going to be working hard, regardless of whether you are mayor or not. You'll be working hard for the city of Raleigh and for Dix, and so we just appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Thanks, Amanda.